Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to this fourth and last webinar of the AMAS webinar series on sustainable asset management, a series of 4 sessions exclusively dedicated to our members on the last EU and Swiss regulatory developments in sustainable finance. For the past 3 sessions, we had the opportunity to deep dive into the latest EU regulatory developments as well as the self-regulation. All webinars are available online in the members area for those who have missed it and would like to learn more. After 3 webinars that very much focused on the theoretical aspect of the EU regulation and the self-regulation 2.1 published over the past 10 days, we are very pleased to put a bit more color to those through a concrete case study. One of our members has kindly accepted to explain how they've implemented the self-regulation to provide early insight and how it aligns with the European framework, what were their challenges, how they've overcome it. We were supposed to have other members providing such case studies today during this webinar, and we will plan for further opportunities to share members' experience and best practices in future webinar, and we welcome, of course, everyone and any member who would like to do so. Today, we have the great pleasure to have Caroline Wavre from Pictet Asset Management with us. But before we give the floor to her, we will briefly go through some of the key developments. And for that, I would pass the mic over to Guillaume.
Thanks a lot, Aurelia, and good morning, dear members. I think most of you were on the webinar series last week and the week before that. So very quickly, before I leave the floor to Caroline, a very quick overview of the green finance. Most of you know these 2 slides. I think on the first one, we have no change, right? We know that self-regulation moved from 1.1 to 2.1. The audit checklist is finalized and is available on our website. We published it last week in the 3 languages. We also published the new version of self-regulation 2.1. On the second slide, maybe there is something that changed last week. You all know that there was a Marschalt decided by the Federal Council. So the Federal Council basically decided to put on hold the Climate Protection Ordinance revision and the Code of Application revision. And the Federal Council decided last week on the 25th of June to also put the ordinance on the climate disclosures on hold, which means that we are waiting for the EU. And when we'll know where the EU will be heading, then the Federal Council will take will begin working again on those 3 important texts. I remind you also that we filed positions in all 3 for all these 3 texts. If we move on to the next slides, and very quickly, because I think most of you participated in the other webinars we organized, this gives you the timeline of what we have done since last year. A year ago, we were indeed presenting new self-regulation 2.0. So now it highlights what we have done since then. Obviously, as I mentioned before, we're really happy to have a full audit program now, worked hand in hand by AMAS and Expert Suisse, which gives us a very pragmatic solution. As I mentioned before, we published everything last week and the week before, and obviously there will be improvements upcoming. And just on the next slide, you all remember why it was important that we draft an audit program and why we have this new audit provision. It's to close the gaps that were identified by the CIF, and this enables us to carry on with the mere self-regulation and without a Mantelverordnung, without a state regulation. So the update of self-regulation 2.1 closes the gap of the audit and enforcement, and we believe self-regulation 2.1 is indeed a stronger version. So as I mentioned, it will further improve. We have an upcoming clarification regarding the use of ESG integration and exclusion. We'll update the Bausteine for securities funds. We'll update the Bausteine. We'll create Bausteine for the real estate funds. So that will be happening in the next months, and obviously we will keep you posted. So without further ado, this gives you a very high-level idea of what we changed in Self-Regulation 2.1. And now I am very happy to welcome Caroline on board and let her give you a couple of insights of how Pictet Asset Management tackles the changes regarding the self-regulation. Thanks a lot, and Caroline, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Guillaume, and thank you for giving us this opportunity to present our case study on how we're implementing the self-regulation at Pictet Asset Management. Good morning, everyone. My name is Caroline Wavre, and I am part of our regulatory change team. And as a senior change manager, I have managed several regulatory projects with Pictet Asset Management, and in particular on the ESG topic, I was managing the EU Action Plan project, which has allowed us to implement SFDR and also the taxonomy regulations from the EU. Today, next slide, sorry, thank you. I'm going to talk about, what are the main changes from V1 to V2.1? What is the gap with SFDR and the approach that we have taken and that we're taking right now for this implementation. So to start with, I think one of the important thing is that the definition of sustainability has been revised, and now we know that, the assets are defined as sustainable or having a sustainability characteristics if it pursues at least one sustainability goal for at least, and this is where it's important, 70% of its assets, and that's excluding cash and derivatives. And the goals to which it can be aligned can either be an alignment with one or more specific sustainability goals, or a contribution to the achievement of one or more specific sustainability objectives. Now, what is important is that these goals, they have to be defined according to a reference framework. And inside, we also have to define which are the specific indicators to measure and monitor those sustainability goals. And the criteria for the framework, it can be either a public framework, so it could be coming from criteria could be coming from a foreign public body, or it could be reflecting industry practice, or it could be actually custom and developed by the asset manager. It is also important that if the collective asset is not considered sustainable, it has to be explained and defined. So, for example, if you have a strategy where only exclusions are applied, the strategy cannot be considered as managed sustainably, and you have to mention it. We can move to the next slide. Thank you. It's important to be transparent. So, the alignment with the objective must be described in the prospectus, and then the reference to the document where, or it can be, reference in a document where it is described. And it can be done at the company level or at the product level. You also need to disclose the key data providers you are using to assess those sustainability goals. And those can be listed again here, either in the prospectus or the IMA, or, it could be in another document that you need to refer to in your prospectus or on a web page. The importance is really the transparency. And the same thing for the underlying stewardship principles. So, for example, you also need to describe this in your prospectus or in another document that you refer to in the prospectus. And you need to explain, for example, what is the escalation process? What is, how do you coordinate with other investors if you want to go further on the engagement and do some actions? So, for example, with Pictet Asset Management, we have a responsible investment policy. This describes all of this. And this is done at the company level. And then, we report also those results in our responsible investment report. on the reporting side, you have to do it at least once a year. So you have, to report on the commitments you're doing and what you're describing in the prospectus once a year. You could do it more frequently if you would like to. Unlike SFDR, there's no, template that you have to adhere to, and the format here is free. So you can define how you want to do it. You can be in a periodic report that exists that you enhance, or it could be on a specific report, or you can put it on a web page. What is important is just that you need to indicate in the prospectus where you will report your KPIs. And back in the report, you also have to indicate, what are the objectives and the results, so you can, people can compare them in the report. From a timeline perspective, V2 comes into force with new funds on the 1st of September. And for existing prospectus and IMAs, you need to update them before March 2026. And for the reporting, it will become mandatory after the first whole year following their probation. Now, what we also have, and this has been a little bit more described in 2.1, is the independent audit, which will, check the compliance with the self-regulation and will produce an audit report. So this has to be done externally. So why are we talking about SFDR as well here for the self-reg? It's because actually being compliant with a foreign regulation such as the EU SFDR, it means you can apply the foreign regulation for some of the collective assets if the remaining ones meet the requirements of the self-reg. So here for Article 9, those are considered in SFDR. They are considered, sustainable for the self-regulation as well, because they have the sufficient disclosures. And also, if you have a sustainable investment objective, which is higher than 70%, you are also compliant fully with the self-reg. So we have, descriptions in the pre-contractual disclosures of what the sustainable investment objective is. And you have to report annually within the periodic reports, which are part of the annual report for SFDR. And the pre-contractual disclosures within SFDR, they're part of the prospectus. The SFDR Article 8 can also be considered, sustainable for the self-reg if, the existing disclosures, if you have 70% of your AUMs are promoting ENS characteristics, and you do have, the sufficient disclosures because you're describing and you have to establish a PCD, a pre-contractual disclosures, as well as periodic reports. Now, SFDR Article 6 are not considered sustainable, neither in SFDR nor for the self-regulation. And there are no, within SFDR, there are no pre-contractual disclosures that are required, nor periodic reports. Now, how that we have done it at Pictet Asset Management? We are a major player with SFDR Article 8 and Article 9 funds. And in addition, in the early days of SFDR, we had a few Swiss clients who were asking us, SFDR equivalents for our Swiss funds. Now, we have also made, when we are implementing SFDR, a conscious decisions to apply the same approach for our responsible investments. So strategy for our Luxembourg funds or for our Swiss funds would all have the same approach. And this has allowed us to classify, all of our funds and to align them with SFDR. So this is a little bit what is shown in the picture, which is not very big, but where we have the example of what is our responsible investment approach. For our Swiss funds, we have opted not to apply SFDR because we did not want to do the full periodic report and put all of the burdens that we need with SFDR, but we are applying, the same approach as we're applying the same approach for our responsible investments. What we have already done is to put a voluntary disclosure in our prospectus, and which is similar to what is for SFDR. And this has already been done. Now, what we need to do to be compliant with the self-reg is for our Swiss funds domiciled in Switzerland, we need to complete some of those disclosures. So typically, for example, we would need to add that we are minimum compliant with at least 70% of our overall investments are following a sustainable objective. We also, on the reporting side, then what we need to do, we've looked at different options. We've analyzed, do we want to put them in the fact sheets, which are produced, on a monthly basis? We would rather do a website disclosure. But at this stage, what we are opting to do is to put the reporting disclosures in an annex of the annual reports. And this, one of the rationale behind there is because it's annual, and it also follows the same, time frame and approach as what we do for our Luxembourg funds. And then finally, with the audit, we are right now in the process of starting to organize that with our auditors and seeing how we can approach it. We still have time on that, but as this all came out last week, we are now starting to look what needs to be done and how we can do it. We should not forget the mandates. And here, what we have already done, we have reviewed all of our strategies and defined a new template for all of our new clients. And actually, this template is more a decision tree where we identify what the ESG objective is, or if they want one, yes or no, then define what is the minimum sustainability. It has to be minimum 70% or more, and then identify, which goal do our clients want to follow. Should it be an alignment or a contribution goal? And then finally defining what it is. The next steps that we have to still do is really to disclose, what is the minimum percentage that investment sustainable objective. Review also in the sustainable index definition and its alignment with the methodology. And finally, also define the KPIs and the stewardship reports, because those are not yet existent, but we do have already some of the things that goes to our clients. On our next slide, actually, here you see an example of our classification with the different categories, the type of exclusions we apply, or more likely the level that we do apply. And then also, you can see we do active ownership for all of our funds. And if we're also looking if a sustainability goal with a minimum of 70% of assets contributing to the objective has been defined or not. So depending on the category, it is a yes or a no. And then finally, also what, the alignment with SFDR classification. On the next slide, here there's a list of metrics that we are going to put in our prospectus and the ones we will be reporting against. So our idea, and this is really, still work in progress on from a reporting perspective, is to have a summary table with a list of all our funds and the main criteria to be able to take, which criteria do they follow or apply. And then after that, what we will do, is to put, as it's described in the next slide, is a table for each of the funds that we have that we need to report on, with the list of all the different indicators that we are using, to define and to measure the sustainability objective, and defining, what was the commitment, which one was used, what is the actual results, and putting also some comments to explain certain things afterwards. So this is a little bit to give you an idea of what we're doing and how we're envisaging to put in place the report that is required for the self-regulation version 2.1. So I hope this gave you a little bit more of examples. This is more just to give you, what are the different approaches and objectives that you can use. This is also referred in the self-reg. There's also different things I really recommend that you look into the self-reg, and also in the different annexes and the Q&A that responds to a lot of the questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Caroline, for the great insight, and thank you so much for having accepted to join us for this webinar and share best practices with the members. In terms of, so as I said, we were supposed to have a second one, so this webinar will be probably a little shorter than expected, but then we will be able to give you some time back, which I'm sure you appreciate, for the last day of June. In terms of the next step, so we've touched upon that in the previous webinars as well, but basically in terms of the timeline, so the self-regulation is published, the auditing program is published as well. In terms of 2.1, we will continue to do some member education in terms of making sure that knowledge is shared, and those best practices are shared as well through basically actually this kind of events, so the webinars, but also through other types of AMAS events. We don't have a Q&A today, and that's on purpose because, as you know, the way we tackle any kind of questions you have on self-regulation is by basically sending your question to us, to Guillaume and I, so that either it's a quick question and we can address it directly, and it's something that it's already been addressed, or we can easily answer, and then it's a no-brainer, we can answer. But most of the time, actually, we need a member and an industry view, and for that we have our working group, legal sustainability, that meets on a regular basis and that addresses the question. We know there is quite a lot of question that it needs to be addressed, so we are on it, and we thank you for your patience there. An important point as well, tomorrow we are happy to launch an expert committee on sustainability, which is basically AMAS only, and for that there was definitely a need, and we've mentioned that before as well. We have a lot of different working groups addressing sustainability related topics, and there was a need for an overarching committee to kind of also ensure sometimes one institute or a common view for the organizations, and that's also the rationale for this expert committee that will be basically launched tomorrow. Important point as well, AMAS and Geschäftsstelle is working on a position paper on sustainability. The last time we published a position paper on the topic was in 2022. 3 years ago, time have definitely changed, and the sustainability topics has also been facing different changes and challenges, and that's why we are working on this position paper to present basically a view on the main changes in terms of what we believe Switzerland and more generally what are the view of the association regarding the topic of sustainable finance. Now that's on the timelines. There will be further improvements and change to the self-regulation. That the beauty of this instrument is that if there is a need, the idea is to amend as we progress, as we implement, as the industry implements. We still owe you a clarification regarding ESG integration and exclusion There's been a need for clarification for some time now. We expected to have addressed that over the past few weeks, but unfortunately that was not made possible. But we will address that in the tomorrow in the expert committee sustainability, and also we'll basically communicate to the members in due course, so in the coming weeks and months. There will also be, and that's also in the making, model text, so Bausteine for real estate funds, that those are actually ready. And we will also amend the Bausteine for securities funds. And as was mentioned earlier, the most important points that we will continue to monitor is obviously international developments and mostly EU developments. As we heard, that's also what the Federal Council and the CIF is looking at. And that is also important and definitely crucial, as we saw also in the example provided by Pictet, that there is an alignment there. With that, we wanted to thank you for joining us on Monday morning for this webinar, and I guess we can close it. We wish you a very good summer. We hope it was useful, and we look forward to see you after the summer break. Thank you.